The sun was dipping behind the skyline, casting long, golden streaks across the windshield. My hand rested lightly on the steering wheel, the silk of my cream blouse brushing against my wrist as I gripped it tighter. There was a strange tension in the air, a buzz that wasn't from the traffic. I had been looking forward to today with a mix of curiosity and a strange reluctance. My grandfather's will reading. Everything about it should have felt like a ceremony, a legal formality. But deep down, I knew it was never that simple with the Hayes family. My phone vibrated again, another last-minute message from my aunt, reminding me how important family was, how everyone would be there. I shouldn't surprise anyone. I scrolled through it, a small ironic smile tugging at my lips. Surprise was exactly what I planned. That's when I saw him. A man, unshaven, clothes tattered, standing at the corner of the street with a sign scrawled in crooked letters, "Don't go there." My first instinct was to ignore him. Homeless men, sad, lost souls had learned to blend into the background. But something about the intensity in his eyes froze me. He raised a finger, almost like a warning, and I felt an unfamiliar tremor of uncertainty pass through me. I shook my head, trying to focus. "Just keep driving," I muttered to myself, but even as I pressed the accelerator, his words lingered like smoke. "Don't go there." And for the first time in years, I felt that old, familiar knot of fear and curiosity swirl together. I remember that summer like it was yesterday. I was 22, fresh out of college, full of hope, and completely unprepared for the storm that awaited me at home. My family had always expected perfection, straight A's, prestigious internships, the kind of achievements that could be displayed like trophies in the living room. But when I told my father I wanted to move to San Francisco and work in a small startup instead of the family law firm, I saw the disappointment in his eyes before he even spoke. "You're throwing away your future, Samantha," he said, voice tight with frustration. My mother didn't even look up from her tea, the silence between us sharper than any words. I felt the lump rise in my throat, my hands trembling as I tried to steady them. I wanted to explain, to tell them that I wasn't running away. I was chasing something that felt real to me, but the words stuck, twisted into something hollow and useless. It was in that moment I found myself alone in my grandmother's old study, a place I had always associated with warmth. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Grandma Hayes had always believed in me, even when no one else did. She reached into her worn leather bag and handed me a small, silver locket. "This isn't just a piece of jewelry, Sam," she said softly, her eyes glinting with quiet determination. "It's a reminder. Life will push you, knock you down, and try to make you doubt yourself. But you carry the strength inside you. Trust it. You're capable of more than they'll ever imagine." I clutched it to my chest, feeling the weight of her faith and the courage she was passing to me. That night, I packed my bags quietly, leaving behind the expectations, the suffocating rules, the constant comparisons. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply stepped out into the night, letting the locket rest against my heart, a talisman against doubt and fear. The world outside was vast, unknown, and terrifying. But for the first time, I felt a strange thrill in standing on my own. It wasn't just escape, it was the first deliberate step toward becoming someone I could respect. And in that quiet, lonely walk to independence, I realized that the only person whose approval I truly needed was my own. San Francisco was nothing like I had imagined, and everything I had hoped for. The city was a symphony of sounds, smells, and possibilities, and every street corner seemed to whisper that I could be anyone I wanted to be. But reality hit fast. My savings were small, my apartment cramped, and the startup world was ruthless. Every morning I would sip bitter coffee from a chipped mug, stare at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, and remind myself, I'm doing this for me. That's when I met Lillian Grant. She was the owner of a boutique marketing agency, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for spotting talent. "You've got fire," she said during our first meeting, scanning my portfolio with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "But fire alone isn't enough. Let me teach you how to turn it into a spark that lights the room." Under her guidance, I learned more than I thought possible. pitching to clients, negotiating contracts, balancing creativity with business acumen. But it wasn't easy. There were nights I cried on the floor of my apartment, frustrated that no one seemed to notice my work, that the deadlines were merciless, and that self-doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. I missed my family sometimes, but the memory of my grandmother's locket pressed against my chest reminded me why I had left. Little victories began to accumulate. My first big client, a small but ambitious tech startup, signed a contract that doubled my monthly income. The first time I closed a deal without Lillian's guidance, I stayed in my office until the moon rose, staring at the ceiling in disbelief that I had made it on my own. I bought a small, elegant journal and began documenting every milestone, every lesson, every victory. It was my quiet rebellion against a world that expected me to fail. Even as success crept into my life, I kept it hidden. My parents believed I was still struggling, seeing only the occasional postcard or vague social media update. I wanted them to see me when I was ready, in control, and unshakable. Not as the girl they had dismissed, but as the woman I had become. I began to invest in myself, a small loft in a lively neighborhood, pieces of artwork that spoke to my taste, and professional development courses that expanded my horizons. Slowly, meticulously, I built a life that was unmistakably mine. And every day, I carried my grandmother's locket, a quiet reminder that independence wasn't just a goal, it was a birthright. Success was intoxicating, yes, but the real triumph lay in knowing I had created it on my own terms. I was no longer the girl who trembled at my father's disapproval. I was Sam Hayes, fully, unapologetically, and my family had yet to see the version of me I had become. The drive to my grandfather's estate felt unnervingly quiet. The city streets had given way to winding country roads lined with oak and maple, their branches swaying like silent sentinels. My grandmother's locket rested against my chest, warm and reassuring, as I parked my car in front of the sprawling, ivy-covered mansion. Everything looked unchanged on the surface, the same old brick driveway, the same garden that my grandfather had meticulously tended, but I knew I was walking in as someone entirely new. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and aged wood. My aunt and uncle were already there, their polite smiles hiding the curiosity and subtle judgment I had grown accustomed to. They assumed I was still struggling, still the girl who had run away, still the one who had failed to meet expectations. Their eyes flicked over me, taking in my tailored navy blazer, the minimalist jewelry, the confidence that seemed to radiate from every measured step I took. I let them stare. When the will reading began, I let my uncle speak first, his voice trembling as he recited my grandfather's words. He expected emotion, maybe tears, perhaps a shy acknowledgement of the family legacy. Instead, I allowed the room to absorb the first layer of my surprise, the loft of my posture, the subtle luxury of my watch, the elegance of the briefcase I carried, a symbol of years of independent achievement. Then I let the moment linger, and I spoke. "I'd like to address the will," I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone lean in. I outlined my grandfather's wishes, every clause, every subtle instruction. And then I revealed the truth I had kept so carefully hidden. "I've been running my own consulting firm for the past 5 years," I continued. "I lead a team of 15, manage accounts with multi-million-dollar budgets, and have established a reputation in 3 states. I've also acquired a stake in 2 startups, invested in property, and if you hadn't noticed, I've built a life entirely on my own terms." There was a stunned silence. My aunt's hand trembled around her teacup. My uncle's jaw tightened. My parents, who had flown in at the last minute, couldn't hide the disbelief in their eyes. I watched as the realization spread across the room. The girl they had dismissed, the one they thought incapable, was now undeniably in command of her destiny. I gestured around the room, toward the elegant furniture I had chosen for my own office, the small stack of contracts discreetly visible in the corner, the subtle art pieces I had installed during previous visits. "Everything you see," I said softly, "has been earned. Not inherited, not given. Earned." I could see the conflict in their eyes, pride struggling to emerge through the guilt, admiration wrestling with shame. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my transformation reflected back at me, and I smiled, not out of cruelty, but because I had finally arrived in a place where my worth was undeniable, visible, and untouchable by anyone else's expectations. The room was heavy with tension, the kind that presses against your chest, demanding attention. For the first time, I had the upper hand, and I intended to wield it carefully. I didn't want to humiliate anyone, though I admit part of me enjoyed watching their expressions twist between awe and shame, but I also wasn't going to bend to old patterns of expectation or tolerate old habits. I cleared my throat, letting my gaze sweep across my family. "I want to help," I said softly, letting the words linger. "But only if certain conditions are met. Conditions that ensure we don't repeat the mistakes that have plagued this family for generations." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, curiosity overtaking caution. "Conditions?" she asked, voice tentative. "Yes," I said, holding the locket lightly in my hand, its silver glint catching the sunlight. "A reminder that guidance is different from control. Here's what I need from each of you." I turned first to my aunt. "You love the family legacy more than you love yourself. You need to pursue your own dreams, not mine or your parents'. Take a course, start that project you've been putting off, and find fulfillment on your terms." To my uncle, I said, "You've spent too many years avoiding responsibility, hiding behind excuses. I want transparency, honesty, and accountability in your work and in your relationships. You need to show up fully in life, not just as a shadow in the background." And finally, my parents. I let my gaze linger on my father first. "You must stop measuring success only by what is convenient for you. Recognize and respect the paths others choose, even if they differ from your vision. Support doesn't mean control." I turned to my mother. "And you must stop pretending that emotional manipulation equals love. Real love encourages, not confines." The room was quiet except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. My words were firm, but compassionate, guidance without condescension, strength without cruelty. I could see it already. The flickers of recognition, the first sparks of willingness to change. "Do these things," I continued, "and I will continue to be a part of your lives. Ignore them, and I will step back. I won't negotiate on growth, honesty, or respect." No one spoke immediately. The weight of the conditions sank in, heavier than any inheritance, more valuable than any money. I knew this was the turning point. They had to choose, either embrace change or remain trapped in old patterns. And as I looked around the room, I felt a surge of gratitude for every hardship, every lonely night in San Francisco, every doubt I had overcome. The locket against my chest reminded me why I had endured it all, so that the power to shape my life and influence others would rest in my hands. I was not just the granddaughter who had run away. I was Sam Hayes, the woman who demanded growth, respect, and honesty. And finally, my family understood that the rules had changed. Weeks passed after the will reading, and the house that had once felt suffocating began to breathe differently. Small changes appeared in my family, not dramatic, but meaningful. My aunt had started her online design course, her laughter more frequent and genuine. My uncle was volunteering at a local community center, learning to face responsibilities without excuses. Even my parents began to soften, listening more than instructing, offering guidance without the need to control. I watched from the loft of my success, yet with my grandmother's locket still resting against my heart, a tether to the girl I once was. It reminded me daily that strength wasn't about dominance, but about the quiet courage to stand by your truth. Every email I sent, every decision I made, carried the weight of those lonely nights in San Francisco, when the city streets whispered possibilities and the world felt both enormous and intimate at once. One evening, I returned to my grandfather's garden, now empty and still, to sit on the old stone bench where I had spent so many afternoons as a child. The breeze carried the faint scent of lavender, and for a moment, I allowed myself to remember fear, doubt, and the sting of rejection. Then I smiled, a soft, full smile, because those moments had led me here, to a place of clarity, independence, and peace. I pulled out the locket and held it in my palm, remembering my grandmother's words, "Trust your strength. You're capable of more than they'll ever imagine." She had been right. I had trusted myself, and it had transformed not only my life, but theirs as well. Growth was messy, beautiful, and continuous. And as I stood, feeling the cool grass beneath my feet, I realized that the power to change my world had always been inside me. No warning, no fear, no doubt could take that away. I looked back at the mansion, the garden, the road that had brought me here, and whispered under my breath, as if to the girl I once was and the woman I had become, "I walk my path on my terms, and no one can stop me." And with that, I turned, letting the future stretch ahead like an open road, confident, free, and undeniably myself.